tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about exceptionalism and a book that Sally Weintraub, who's from England, wrote about the psychological roots of the climate crisis. And it's really all about exceptionalism. I kind of knew about it, but I didn't know how profound it was. And if you read the book, it's pretty striking. It just came out last year. So basically, this work, it's over 100 years old. Carl Jung came up with some of the original stuff. And basically, there's two parts of us. We all have it. One is a caring self that cares about others. And then there's an other side of us that's the uncaring self. And there's a continual tug of war in us. And both sides kind of fight for dominance. And normally the caring self reins it in the uncaring self for most people. And we'll call the uncaring self exception from time to time in here. And it's kind of a foundational entitlement that exceptions want to have everything and be everything and not have any inner conflict. And it kind of goes back to when we're babies. We all start out with as kind of uncaring selves. We pretty much, our world revolves around me, what I need right now. And so we cry for attention and so forth. But as we grow, we develop a caring self. So but some people kind of go back to that. Again, we all have this uncaring side. When uncare dominates, we can actually kind of mentally deregulate and enter a bubble, and it's called a fraud bubble. And in this bubble, the scary thing about it is we may not even be aware that we're in it. Okay, so that becomes our truth. And you think about the, we have alternative facts and things like that. Actually could be people's truths. And it's a self-sealed system, and it promotes deafness. And inside here, limits can be ignored, lies are okay, greed is fine. You need to take care of yourself, so it's good. And an interesting thing about the group in the bubble is the more that the group sees itself as superior and virtuous and desirable and strong, it tends to kind of demonize the people who are outside of the bubble. So that's kind of a significant thing. And you may think about events, current events and so forth, and realize maybe some of these relate to that. Some examples of fraud bubbles: the 2008 financial crisis. The folks in the banking world, they knew it couldn't be real, but they just kind of ignored it. The 2020 presidential election, 63 lawsuits, and none, were decided in favor of the election, had a problem. The climate crisis, which Weintraub says is the biggest fraud bubble in human history. So that's a big one, and obviously our chapter's about climate change, so I thought it was appropriate. And then I think related to me, at least, is the idea of a consumer bubble. And if you think about how the commercials have changed, if you've been around for a long time, Wayfair, one of their jingles is, "I want it all and I want it now." Nothing consumerist about that, right? Marshalls, there are a number of them that are kind of following that same kind of path. People end up in a bubble and they think that that's okay, and that becomes their truth. It's not new, this idea of exceptionalism, and if you look at Judeo-Christian background, man holds dominion over all except women are excluded, and the idea of archism, like Noah's Ark, when all of the bad people and all of the animals in the world except the chosen few were wiped out during the Great World Flood. Kind of has an exceptionalism flavor to it, I think. And I thought of some other examples. There are about 20 major religions in the world that have over 1 million people. And there's pretty widespread belief that if you're, so I was raised Catholic, I was definitely taught Catholicism is the only way. And I know that holds for other faiths as well. It's not universal, and it's not universal within a faith, but certainly there's that bent, right? So it's toward exceptionalism. belief in the superiority of your race or your culture or your country over others. And a great example is British colonialism, the saying, the sun never sets on the British Empire. So everything was to bring back and support the mother country, if you will, and if there were consequences to other countries, well, so be it. We're supporting the empire, right? And Weintraub makes, I think, an interesting argument that this exceptionalism is taken off in the 1980s and on, but now she considers it to be, and others do as well, that it's in gangster form and openly portrays itself as godlike, with godlike omnipotent powers, unashamed to appear odd and crazy as it defines what is normal, usual, acceptable, and sane. That sound familiar a little bit? So yeah, gangster. So if we kind of look at the core beliefs of an exception, this uncaring self side, I am entitled to see myself as ideal. I am entitled to use this magical thinking to get rid of any kind of moral, unease I might have about these things. And I'm entitled, I'm actually entitled to have whatever I want. So these reinforce each other, these beliefs, and they're kind of sustained by this adamant and unwavering sense of exaggerated entitlement. Again, does that sound familiar? As I was reading the book, it just was screaming at me, kind of the way the world seems to be, at least part of it. So now I want to talk about strategies that are used by exceptions, this uncaring self, right? The first one is, I can take whatever I want. The whole world is mine. I can just do whatever I want. Nothing gets in the way of my pursuit of wealth. No externalities, no limits, nothing, no injustice. And I found this speech from the Vice President of the Confederacy. Our new government is founded upon exactly the opposite idea. The foundations are laid, its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery subordination to the superior race is his natural and normal condition. You can read the rest. There's, some, I can take whatever I want and I'll write it down. See, look, it's good. I just justified what I want to do. And then the next one is idealize others and ideas. So I absolutely think of Donald Trump with this: good becomes perfect and bad becomes perfectly bad or terrible. And you see this rhetoric over and over again. So things like trickle-down economics, it's perfect because it gives the money to those who deserve it the most, the people that are the best at creating wealth, right? We shouldn't get in the way of this absolute competitiveness because otherwise the economy is going to fall apart. Absolutely have to have it, right? It's perfect. And then the opposite end of the spectrum is with the Green New Deal, creates so much hatred for the squad that nobody wants to talk about what's actually in the Green New Deal and why it's important. So that discussion never happens. So it's a perfectly bad idea from perfectly bad people. We should never talk about it. And then using nostalgia, come back to some fantasy time before the entitlements were wrongly taken, wrongly stolen from me. Yeah. Promotes selfishness. And so Ayn Rand, Weintraub thinks she's in the Exceptionalist Hall of Fame. And there's some of her quotes. She moved from Russia, and I think she died in 1982. But she had a profound effect on some of the conservative, I'll use that in quotes, thinkers in America. I am self-made. I refuse to apologize for my mistake, for my success, and I refuse to apologize for my money. Exploitative treatment and unaccountability are moral, and superiority is a virtue. You are fully entitled to be exceptions. Wow, it's pretty powerful. We create fake reality and we cut concerns about things. So we're constantly destroying evidence in our minds because we have to do that. There's this inner conflict, like that's not real, but if you convince yourself, you can actually have it become your truth. And another thing is stop the clocks, take away any emergency. Yeah, we should deal with climate change someday, but we don't need to do it now. And if you think about the oil company commercials from this past, starting even around before Thanksgiving, but I remembered starting to see them around Thanksgiving, they keep the lights on for you. This is really important stuff, right? And hey, we're working toward reducing our emissions, and the US had its lowest emission year ever and stuff, right? And then denial, of course, and there's two forms of denial. Say it's not true, and then say, okay, it's true, but it doesn't matter. You just get rid of all the context. And the tobacco industry and lung cancer came to my mind as an example about denying it, but then also, the science doesn't truly say that it's bad. Just create this, air of ambiguity. So, and then argue part truths and lump comparisons. So an interesting one is saying democratic socialism in Denmark is the same as both socialism and communism. Those are two different things, but when you hear folks talk about it, a lot of times they lump them together. It's kind of interesting. So you're just talking half-truths. Project something bad about you onto others. This is including demonizing the groups that are being, hammered by what you're doing, right? So one thing would be, we can't have these regulations because government officials, you can't trust them. They're going to just look out for their own self-interest, right? Never mind what you're trying to do, right? And then I just came across this one 17 days ago, Donald Trump, and I'll let you read that. It's kind of interesting about projecting bad onto others.
That's interesting that Donald Trump would accuse other people of being racist.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. And I like the end. The end is a nice touch. In reality, they're not after me. They're after you. And I just happen to be the person who's standing, on the front lines. It's a really special kind of guy. Anyway, only pretend to solve problems. Healthcare, we're going to have a new plan in 2 weeks. We're going to have a new plan in 2 weeks. We're going to have a new plan in 2 weeks. Never intended to fix that problem. It's very clear. Setting targets, but have zero intention of actually fixing something. All you have to do is talk about it. Then it's good. Or say, hey, we already have money for that. It's even though it might not have been allocated. Or say that the money is being misused. We have plenty of money. We could address this problem, but anyway. And then this goes to the business side of things, cut regulations that get in the way of any kind of, corporate profit, and delegitimize government interventions that you don't like. And then there's this thing called the Overton window of political ideas. So it's kind of the bracketing of what is acceptable. And if you push that into the area, that you want, for instance, Vladimir Putin right now is shifting what the world will accept with Ukraine. I heard this evening on the news, the US is, maybe going to kind of give into the idea that some of Eastern Ukraine should be taken over by Russia. I was just stunned by that. Like, what? I thought we went through this before in 1940. This doesn't work. Anyway, I digress. And then write your own rules. So once you get in charge, you write the rules, and then you say, we need unanimous consent for any other new rule changes, which is really kind of smart, I guess, if you want to keep going in the way you're doing things. And outsource the damage. And this one is profound to me. I think about it a lot. Our economic models allocate zero of Earth's resources to future generations. That is, we just assume, well, they'll find something to use, there's none. That's it's a hard problem, but zero, nada, nothing, right? And then this is an interesting one, and it kind of gets toward how maybe society is separating. We disassociate, we sever connections with the caring self, as well as other people that are caring. I've actually seen this in my family. It hurts a lot. You just start to treat people as overburdened. It's that's just sad, right? And then nurse grievances, and I think going after underemployed or low income folks in the rural states that has been a good tactic for exceptionalists, trying to get them to just feel like you've been cheated. We're going to help you, and they have no intention of helping. But so the grievance thing is in there, and then keep things in the dark. Certainly, I've seen some of that. Secrecy is the norm, because really people, if they're in your bubble, they don't really want to know anyway. So and you're just catering to the people in your bubble, and then never cede the power. And we saw that on January 6th and others, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So now here's a special case, neoliberal exceptionalism. And really what this is capitalism with no rules, unbounded, right? And the only way this works is if the consumer, which I don't know if any of you take offense at being called a consumer, but one day I realized I'm not a consumer. I'm a person, I'm a citizen. So now it bugs me every time I hear it on TV. And if you listen, you'll hear it all the time and you'll see it written about. But anyway, so for this to work, you need kind of the collusion of the populace, right? So we need to convince people that they're special and they're ideal and they could buy whatever they want. If you can't afford it, put it on your credit card. And your world is an Eden-like shopping mall with no limits. Just there's no consequences. So you should never, ever feel bad. It's all good, right? Never be inconvenienced. Don't make me wear a mask. And your self-worth is defined by things, and you are an ideal provider of things, right? And you really shouldn't have to care about others because they have the exact same chance as you do in life. And of course, we know that's garbage, right? And there's nothing that you're doing that's bad, that's going to end up with a bad consequence. And finally, this is the only way. So that's some pretty powerful stuff that is kind of fed to us. And how is it fed to us? Well, through the media and marketing and everything. And one thing in particular is denialism. It's got its own industry. And basically, we want to undermine public confidence in science, in government, and other things, right? So it's intentional, it's organized, it's planned, it's willful, it's knowing, it's all those things. And if you haven't read it, the book Merchants of Doubt about the tobacco industry and how those folks got involved in the propaganda for climate, this is a pretty good read. So again, has its own industry, and what they make are ridicule and doubt and rinse and repeat. Just keep doing it and doing it and doing it. And if you're in the science world, it's very frustrating. And I guess I've been kind of a victim of that with Maryland's what the Republicans called the rain tax, and the justification for people having to take care of runoff from their property was from data from the statewide stream survey that I ran for a number of years, and it was really good data and basically used a good framing exercise to make people ridicule the what was a good idea. So anyway. And today, this practice is totally normalized, and people don't know who to trust. And that's exactly what the exceptionalists want, right? And why does it work so particularly well is, well, one thing is we're not as educated in science as we maybe even once were. So people are kind of vastly uneducated in science. But the information, like think about climate. And Meg, you were talking about just how you see it on PBS. It's like, oh my God, this is terrible. It's disturbing, And if you deny it, it's fine. It's all good. Don't worry about it. So it's much easier to go the other way. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what does all this mean? Well, first of all, any of the ordinary logical relationships are gone, right? I like to think some of the elected officials in Carroll County have a brain and they're rational people and all that, and it's kind of hard to see that sometimes. And then what you see is resizing of problems, right? Climate should be being talked about constantly, and it really isn't. And that's, you know, they just get rid of it. And then we have this division into the people that are in the bubble and then the outed, you know, kind of the haves and the must not haves. And you end up with a total shamelessness of one side, the folks in the bubble. So, okay, all that's fine. Now we kind of know about it. I'm a person of action. So I think we need to think hard about how this fits into the work that we do, right? And you know, what did you do during the Great Warming, which some people are now calling what we're in now? It's the Great Warming. And this is hard. This is a hard change, right? Because the Western world, we've been doing this for 400 years, exaggerated entitlement and industrialism. And it was largely supported by religion, if you think about it. So it's difficult to even think about, right? Because it produces anxiety and all of that. So, but the problem is still there, right? To survive, our species needs to stay within nature's limits, if you want to just boil it all down to one thing, right? So it's something we have to solve. We can't just say, oh, too hard, sorry, next generation, it gave me too much of a headache, I'm gonna walk away, right?
Yeah.
And you know, when I think about where would I start, I think about the have-nots, right? The folks in West Virginia that, you know, why do they tend that way? And how do we change that? And some of my thoughts are we need to kind of burst their bubble. There's some evidence that the climate bubble is actually bursting. There are some elites now buying survival bunkers in New Zealand with years of food. They kind of understand, oh, we screwed this up, I'm just gonna have a backup plan here. Anyway, we need to burst the bubble. And I think truthful messages directly aimed at them, not shaming them and, you know, not being condescending, but talking truth, right, in a way that they understand. And I think also we'll call all of us on this call elites, right? We elitists need to show that we own our piece of the mess. And years ago, Al Gore was held to task because his house had some very high number of kilowatt hours per month. And he said it was for security and all that. But, you know, I thought at the time, boy, that was really stupid. You know, he should have been on renewable energy and you know, a lot of things should have been done. And I talked to somebody recently about trying to get Gore to come to a talk, and he wouldn't come because his plane couldn't land close enough. And I was like, okay, that's kind of still elitist. So anyway, that was a little disappointing to hear from somebody that had firsthand knowledge, right? Okay, so back to these have-nots. We cannot be condescending, and we have to pay attention to maintaining their idealized status, what they think of themselves, you know, salt of the earth, whatever that is for them. We can't just break their bubble and have them feeling bad about themselves. It has to be done differently, right? We also need to improve just generically the social environments, because they improve frameworks of care. So what we need to do is kind of create a good enough world, if you will. And other cultures have that. We don't now, and it's going the wrong way. So we just need to work on that. So one of the climate solutions is improving social environments. That's kind of interesting, but everything's connected, so maybe it does make sense. Another thing would be to point out and magnify acts of care so that people see this is a caring world. And if you turn on the news, you pretty much only, you know, 95% is bad stuff. So how do we point out those in ways that our have-nots will see it? So we need to think about that. I wrote down spreading gratitude. Gratitude is the enemy of exceptionalism. So teaching people to be grateful for the world, for things that people do for them, all of that. And you know, some of these things I think would be great to spread into school systems, right? So anyway, and then my last thought was engineering transformative moments so people can see their wishful fantasy. It ain't quite reality, right? So we need to think skillfully about how to show people, you know, show Donald Trump behind the scenes talking, you know, off mic, about how he doesn't care about people or something. I don't know. But we need to start doing some of those, use our creative minds, and we can actually engineer these things, right? And then what should we as individuals do? My first thing is don't ever call me a consumer again. We have to show the world that we have the will to fight this. And it's, as late as it is with climate, it's better now to act than never. And our next couple generations would surely agree with us that that is the appropriate course of action right now, right? Sharing in our circles, how profound climate damage makes us feel, and ecological damage generally, right? And then I think more of us taking direct action, planting trees, getting out, volunteering and so forth is really important, right? We need to change things. And, as I think about how things have progressed, there are fewer and fewer people volunteering. So kind of need to change that, because that's part of that social framework, right? And then we all have an exceptional side to us. So one example I thought of was, don't just let Sierra Club figure things out and throw some money at them every Christmas or whatever and think you're doing enough, right? Don't blame it all on the corporations or the fossil fuel industry. We have collusion in this as well, right? So we have to own that, and then we have to figure out ways to do that, right? So I've made a personal commitment to myself that I will never buy a fossil fuel vehicle again. I just won't. I don't care how inconvenienced I will be driving. I'm going to do that, right? And then again, lower our defenses, because we have the bubble, right? We don't want to come out of it, except that we've been part of the problem here. Grieve over that. Like that makes me feel bad. Move on after that. But you do need to grieve, right? Because otherwise you won't accept it. And then the last thing is stop breeding entitlement in our kids. How do we do that? And grandkids too, I guess. So how am I doing on time, Ted? Is it all right?
Maybe a few more minutes.
Okay, all right, I only have 2 more slides, and one of them is a 1-minute video, so, all right. So people are now saying the climate fraud bubble is breaking up. How do we break that up even faster? Again, storytelling about concerns, pointing out the obvious changes, using stories and not graphs, right? Think about climate reality training, 670 graphs. That's actually not the way to go. It may be in a few cases, but the science, the social science suggests that's probably not the way to go. All right, well, let's think about that. We should press the media to stop lying or ignoring stuff like climate change, right? And also, show the privileged few and the sacrificed many in real terms. What's happening? We tend to ignore the global south, and we tend to ignore what's happening in the Arctic with cultures up there that did very little to contribute to their mess that they're having. I really like this idea of criminalizing ecocide. So if you're one of the corporations or governments that is just devastating things, there should be accountability for that. And the last one is raise the human spirit. And hopefully I'll do that with this last video, which kind of comes from Awakening the Dream, or at least one version that, let's see.
Yo, listen up. This is your home. It's the only one you got. This place is pretty, but you can't live there. You can't even get there. So I repeat, this is your home. It's the only one you got. Cherish it, protect it. It's the only one you're gonna get. These guys, they're your neighbors. They ain't going away, they ain't leaving. You have to get along with them. So you have to learn to share. You have to get along. You have to learn to get along. Because they are your neighbors, they're not going away. Okay, all this stuff, the animals, the waters, the sky, the ground, the bugs, the fish, the tacos, the people, they're all connected. Everything is connected. They all depend on one another. If you ignore that, you're doomed. Repeat, doomed, okay? So listen up, it's all one. Not 2 worlds, not 3, one. Just one. So get it in gear. Remember, all is one, okay? Hit it.